I am a mom of 6, almost 7, currently pregnant with baby number 7. So I homeschool my kids. I don't know. I feel like I'm just kind of a typical mom. I am just a regular person that wants to follow truth and follow God. I've never, ever doubted that God existed. Not once have I ever doubted.
Were you raised in the church? Do you have a missionary story of how you learned the gospel?
I was born and raised. In fact, I have ancestors from Joseph Smith's time and all the way up until now. So it's definitely in my blood.
I first want to ask if you can tell me when you first learned about polygamy.
I feel like it's always been from the very beginning. Like I remember reading in the Bible about Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. And hating it, like from the very, very beginning, even little girl, just like, it just broke my heart hearing the women's stories. And I just couldn't wrap my mind around a loving God wanting that for his daughters. We were really good about reading the Book of Mormon, which I'm very grateful to my mother for that. And there's a verse, I think in 2nd Nephi, that talks about 7 women to 1 man in the last days. And so like that's always been on the back of my head, is like that would be something that I would have to look forward to. Thankfully, I know otherwise about like a different interpretation, but it has haunted me ever since I was a little girl. So I have an ancestor. He went up to Utah. So I guess they were like settling in Arizona. And he went up to Utah and he came back with a bride. And his wife had no idea that she was going to be there. So here she was, super excited to see her husband, who she hasn't seen in a long time. And here he is with someone else. And I have always hated that story. Every time I think about it, it just breaks my heart. That has just lived with me all of these years. I just can't, again, I cannot see how God can be okay with that. I don't remember too much more than that until after getting married. That's when it really hit me. Before getting sealed in the temple, and that was 12 years ago, about 6 months before, I remember polygamy just hit me out of nowhere. Like I was just feeling really, really bothered by it. Because, we always put polygamy on a shelf. We're just going to leave it alone. We don't want to think about it. But for some reason, it kept coming in my face the closer we got to being sealed. And to be quite honest, it got to the point where I just didn't want to be here anymore. Like if that's something that we have to look forward to, then I'm not interested. And I don't remember exactly like how I worked through that. I guess I got the typical answers from family members, church leaders. Like it's one of those things where we'll understand it more in the next life. And I guess at that moment, that's when I was able to kind of let it calm down and be like, okay, I don't understand it now, but I know that eventually I will. I was able to put it on a shelf that whole entire, like up until 2 years ago. I just kept putting it back in there. And then it was the weirdest thing. On Facebook in 2021, I started seeing a lot of pro-polygamy posts. Apparently, I was friends with a lot of people who believe in this doctrine. And it was so strange because the more I read their posts, the more depressed I became. The thought of him being intimate with other women, like I always hear, oh, well, you're just jealous. And I would be jealous. Absolutely. But it's more than that. That's what binds a husband and a woman and makes their marriage special. And if you're sharing that with anybody and everybody, what is special about someone's marriage? I did have wonderful ministering sisters. They knew my struggle that I was having with polygamy. And so I was able to talk to them and every time they'd come over, like I would always bring it up because I was not at peace with it.
Were you able to talk to your husband about it? Or was that even hard?
Yeah, I was able to talk with him, and he was very like, I'm not ever getting married to any other woman. Like I have no desire, don't want to do that, which I will forever be grateful. But that was besides the point, because if it's a true doctrine, he was going to be forced to do it anyways, whether he liked it or not. Ultimately, he didn't have a choice when it came down the road. Again, I feel like this is key right here. The more I try to be open and understanding of polygamy, the more depressed I became. And which didn't make any sense to me at the time. Like, I don't understand if this is a true principle. Why am I crying for literally hours after I read a pro polygamy post? I kept going back and forth. Like, is this from God or is this from Satan? Yeah, that was the start of a really dark period in my life. Like, it got really, really, really dark. I don't think anybody understands how obsessed I was about trying to find peace over the matter, and it was not coming. A year ago, I went to Education Week and in Utah, and I specifically wanted to take the polygamy class that was offered. There was, I think I went to 2 different classes, and one of them, it was the most packed class out of all of the classes. The line was wrapped around the building. I mean, like, and they had to open like 3 extra rooms because people, I think there's this great awakening. We want to know truth. And I was trying to be open. I think that's key. Have to remember that I was sincerely trying to understand. I was desperate for peace over the matter. And it never came. I didn't feel any better after the class. In fact, I felt worse. The one question that I really wanted answered was, do we have a choice in the next life to do polygamy or not? Because I have heard that in order to get to the highest degree of glory, we have to participate in polygamy. And so I was desperate to hear them say, you don't have to do polygamy in order to get to the highest degree. Strangest thing, because during that class, he was going over section 132 and then digesting it. And he basically said what I wanted him to say, what I wanted to hear. And I remember my mom looking at me and she's like, oh, that's your answer, and I surprisingly felt really empty. Looking back, I think that's because it was a truth mixed with a lie, because polygamy was still a part of the equation in his answer. And so I think that's why the Spirit couldn't testify of truth, because there was that lie that was, mixed within it. I did open up to a sister, my oldest sister of mine, about my feelings on polygamy. And after Education Week, she sent me a Brian Hales video. I watched every minute of those 3 hours. And that evening, I don't think I got any sleep because I was sobbing through the entire night. And my husband was holding me, and nothing he was saying was consoling. I had no idea that Joseph Smith supposedly got married to women behind Emma's back without her even knowing. I had never heard those stories before. The kicker too was I had always understood that if the first wife said no, then they would have to go with that answer. But that's not what he was saying. He was basically saying, well, whether you like it or not, if the man feels to call more women, to get married to more women, then he's perfectly able to do that. And then just, of course, feeling heartbroken for Emma, having gone through such deep personal betrayal. I cannot imagine a loving God asking his sons to do that to his daughters. So fast forward a couple months later, my ministering sister, she came over and she could tell how weighed down I was. I just had this dark blackness around me. And she told me that to lay it all at God's feet and just give it to him. And so that evening, I said the hardest prayer I have ever prayed in my entire life. And I completely broke in front of God. And I said, thy will be done. If you want me to do polygamy, I will do it, but I'm going to need you to help me do this. And so and that was it. It was like the end of October. And I was sobbing, of course, during the whole prayer, just like, I can't believe that I'm to this point where I'm willing to do it. But like, I want to be a good person. I want to do what God wants me to do. And I think that was, another hard thing was all of the pro-polygamous posts that I would read was, well, only the righteous are going to do it. So then I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I so unrighteous that this is hard for me to do? Because I've always tried to be a good person. So after this prayer, I had actually been off of Facebook for almost an entire year at this point. And I kept feeling prompted to get back on Facebook. And so the end of November, I got back on, and I'm not even kidding. One of the very first posts that I came across was a friend sharing your podcast. And it was the episode on Emma and Joseph Smith. And I'm like, you know what? I had nothing to lose at this point. I've already watched so many. Might as well listen to another, to see if I can, understand more. And I think it was almost 2 hours long. And I literally cried the entire episode. I finally felt the peace that I was looking for. And it was like this weight came off of my shoulders and it came off of my head and my heart. And like, it was like the Spirit was like saying, yes, 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 this is your answer. And I will never, ever forget it. So ever since then, the more that I have watched your podcast, it makes sense to me. It feels good. It feels right. And I just like, that's it. That's the answer. And so I can say I have gone to literal hell and back. And I know the difference between looking into pro-polygamous arguments and then listening that polygamy is not of God and it never has been. And just, I know for myself, and nobody can ever take that away from me.